Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the comprehensive news analysis or the Hindu analysis. Now we have 5 to 6 very interesting topics revolving around the India-US deal and some data point articles which we have to discuss today. But there are two very important announcements for you. As soon as this session will be over and based on a lot of popular demand at 11:30 a.m. meaning we'll end by 11. Good morning to all of you. At 11:30 a.m., phase 2 and phase 3, the schedule of Conquer Prelims is going to be announced via a video which will be uploaded at 11:30 a.m. So a lot of you have been asking for Conquer Prelims phase 2 and 3 schedule itself, and the schedule is going to be provided through that video. So just look out for that. Watch that video. It will explain everything to you, how you're going to go about phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is going to be on the app, which is MCQs based out of previous year questions. And for example, a heads up for my sessions, it would be happening on 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th of February at 2 p.m. And phase 3 is one-shot marathons. If you remember, this is one-shot marathons. And I'll be starting with the first marathon on 10th of February. What we will be discussing, I will share with you very soon. In the next 3 days, today, tomorrow and day after, I'm going to take CNA. So we'll figure it out together what we can do. I would like suggestions from you in the comment section in what you want for the one-shot marathon. For example, I can do a one-shot marathon only on ancient. I can do it on ancient and medieval. Or you want a one-shot marathon on modern. Or you want a one-shot marathon on art and culture. Because modern art and culture can be done alone. Ancient medieval can be done together. So therefore, if you want me to take a specific topic or specific configuration in this, which is with regards to the concept of ancient, early medieval, medieval, modern, art and culture, any combination, you let me know. 10th of February, though phase 3 is spread out across February and March. So it will start on 10th of February, but it will be spread out across the whole month and next month. This is going to be between the whole month of February. It will start most probably from tomorrow and thereafter it will go on till 20th of February. So I want all of you to comment in the comment section what type of marathon you want to be the first one for history, one-shot marathon. You let me know, we'll figure it out, right? Okay. Now, today the topics which we have to discuss are quite interesting. One, where the judiciary is basically creating a lot of issues for Meta, and we'll discuss what is the judicial ultimatum which has been given. Then 3 articles which deal with a very controversial topic as of right now, which is a US trade deal. There is a lot of, you can say, conversation, criticism which is happening of the government and a lot of things with regards to this in the parliament, outside the parliament and in the newspaper. But 3 articles which tell us the contours, though very opaque, we have no real details about the trade deal, but what we understand of it. Thereafter, a data point article which deals with how there is informalization within the education sector. Then we have denotified tribes. This is very interesting, a colonial issue which still persists today. We'll talk about that. And in the end, we'll talk about the NASA, what is called as the moon mission, which has been delayed because of certain issues. Now, out of this, this is an text and context article. This you may not find in all the editions, Delhi edition and only metropolitan editions. And this is an editorial. Along with that, these are 2 different articles. There was one editorial on fiscal deficit, which Shyam sir will deal separately. It was a technical article. There is his expertise needed for that. So he will deal with that separately. So let's start our understanding. And as you know, with the notification out, the flat 50% offer is back with regards to IAS English code is very, very important for you to get the least price possible. And please remember to complete, if you are going to give the examination in 2026 and anybody who's 2027, I would say please complete all the 4 processes if you are a 2026 aspirant, from account creation to the concept of the URN to CAF common application form and then the UPSC form. These are the 4 steps which you have to complete. But if you are 2027, 28, whatever exam you want to give with the UPSC, now it is important to complete these 3 steps because you have a head start. You have a lot of things which is not going, which is going for you, and you are not under pressure. At least create the account, do the URN, and do the CAF. These 3 things you can do. If there's any issue, there's a Google form link in the description box. That's a helpline for you. You can contact us on that and we'll figure it out with you if there's an issue or not. So remember, for 2026 students, completing all 4 steps completes the process of application to UPSC. Whilst for 27, 28, a word of advice is at least complete these 3 so that you don't have to do this just before the examination. It is already something which is sorted. Right? Okay. Can we start our conversation for today with regards to the judicial ultimatum? Yes or no? Yes, sir. No, sir. Come on. Tell me. Okay. Now, we all know how important WhatsApp is. Let's be very clear. Unlike the US, where Apple Messages is an ecosystem in itself, it is quite integrated per se. India is not the land of Apple Messages, even though everybody nowadays has an Apple device because of the EMI features and all of that. Still, we don't use Apple Messages that much or its ecosystem. What we use and is now a staple, even businesses are running on that, is WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp is owned by Meta, as we know, the same company which owns Facebook or is the monopolistic, you can say, power with regards to Instagram, WhatsApp, Meta, Facebook. It's a monopoly in itself when it comes to social media. Now, what has recently happened is there's a certain ultimatum which has been given by the Supreme Court, and there's a certain standoff which has happened between Meta and the Supreme Court with regards to how data is seen. Now, as always, what I'll do is I'll give you the basic gist of this article, then we'll go into the details, and then I'll give you a mind map so that you can revise and understand. Let's take into consideration the first point. What Meta sees you as or me as is a word called, we have seen as an exhaust in that regard, or a byproduct, wherein when we use WhatsApp, we are using a service, but we put in a lot of data into WhatsApp, lot of data into Facebook, and therefore that data is considered to be very valuable in today's age. Data mining, data collection is in itself a very big industry nowadays, and WhatsApp holds on to that. Now the question is, mostly this data is used for personalized ads. So ad services use this data to understand what are you looking for. That is why whenever you're talking about a phone, when you're talking about a watch, or for example a shoe, automatically personalized ads will start to show it, because in most cases your phone is listening to you. In most cases WhatsApp in a way does not read your messages, which is encryption processes are there, but at least looking at your age bracket, it is able to figure out what things will in a way interest you. So therefore the idea is WhatsApp holds on to data which is extremely important and very, very valuable. Now previously the whole concept was who holds the data. This was the conversation. There is a whole timeline here. It starts with Competition Commission of India, then goes to the NCLAT, and thereafter it goes to the Supreme Court. And the initial conversation was about data and data location. Who holds on to the data? But what Supreme Court has done is it has added a very interesting feature or a very interesting concept within this conversation, which is what is about who holds the profit to this data. Meaning, when you monetize this data, who holds on to that profit? For example, if Meta has a certain repository of rural Indian phones and their basic understanding of when they are active, when they use that data to generate profit vis-a-vis ads, who gets the share into that revenue or into that ad revenue per se? And that is where the idea of mining our data, using it for profit, and the economic sovereignty here is also being questioned. Meaning, a US based company can come, give a service, take a lot of information, use it to generate profit, and that profit is then transferred to the US. So it is not just about privacy. Very good point. It's not just about privacy. It is about value. The value of that data is extremely important. And when it is extremely important, who holds on to that data and in what form is equally important. This is basically the gist of this article. And the Supreme Court has said, either you remove your services, either in a monopolistic world where your data plans, term and conditions, nobody has an option to actually deny it. And therefore, when there is no deniability, you are a monopolistic entity. Either you remove your services, or you tell us what is going to happen with that profit, or you create a jurisdiction or give the what we call as the CCI penalty which was pushed onto Meta. So let's now add the details and try to understand what is this timeline and what is this concept. We'll create a mind map for that also. See, as of right now, in most cases, Meta sees us user data as an exhaust, out of which they can harvest and refine for advertising services. The Supreme Court, in a way, changed this metaphor on 3rd of February and said, we are not doing, we as a product or we as a customer are not the exhaust. You are doing theft. What you are doing is, in an age where there is pure monopolistic behavior by you, your consent is nothing but coercive. There is no choice per se. Very interesting point, that when there are only 2 to 3 actors or even one actor in that regard, your way of coercing us to accept your terms and conditions is pure monopolistic behavior, and the Supreme Court has noted this. Now, this is not the first institution which has pointed this out, and this saga starts in 2021. If you remember, in 2021, there was a proper hue and cry over a major change which happened with regards to WhatsApp terms and conditions. I don't know if you remember it or you were part of it or not. The point is, in 2021, there was a proper hue and cry where WhatsApp changed its concept of how it was going to use the data, and a lot of people said boycott WhatsApp. That is also the year and the era in which Telegram became very, very important. There were also a lot of alternative messaging apps which are coming through. Telegram has persisted, but it has also become problematic over the years. But Meta said, either you accept it or you don't accept it. Signal, yes, the era of Signal in that regard. Now, this take it or leave it attitude which Meta showed in 2021 in turn led to the Competition Commission of India to flag the concerns of this dominant behavior. It is pure monopolistic behavior, and the Competition Commission of India is created for such form of behavior, and therefore in the 2021 CCI ruling, it said that it is abusing its dominance, and a 213 crore penalty was pushed onto it. Further, the CCI said that Meta can't share WhatsApp user data with any of its entities for the next 5 years for advertising. Meaning, you hold on to the data, we have no issues. But you cannot further use this data or send it to Instagram, send it to your what is called as Facebook ads, or the core company, which is Meta, can't use this data internally. It can use it only for WhatsApp. Now, obviously, Meta was not going to accept something like this. So it went to the NCLAT, which is the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Now, the NCLAT, what it did was, it said CCI is correct. You are acting in a dominant behavior. The penalty is also correct, which is 213 crores. But the NCALAT said that the idea of 5 years ban on internal consent and use by parent and subsidiary is something which is problematic. So there was a relaxation. The relaxation was that Meta can use the data picked up from WhatsApp, and as it is a subsidiary, it can send it to Meta, and then Meta can use it for Instagram also and for other services also. So one form of relaxation came through. Thereafter, because the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023 was going to be formulated, the data concept was kept aside and the idea of basic relief and understanding was created. They said, like, let us decide how data protection will go forward. We have the whole committee for that. We'll see what happens. Now, when the idea of the penalty was still there, Meta moved to the Supreme Court. Now, in the Supreme Court, the initial argument which was made was that it is basically opting out. This is very interesting. The Chief Justice argued that opting out of WhatsApp is like opting out of the country, and the network effect here, that everybody is on WhatsApp, is extremely important. So we all have enabled Meta to act in a monopolistic way. Therefore, that is what it is, and we have put us in this position itself. Now, the consumer behavior and the global regulatory mechanisms and your monopolistic behavior are not going together. And this is where the Chief Justice and Justice Bagchi reframed the issue into a very interesting question. The question was not of privacy, but was of ownership and economic value. Meaning, data as property question was introduced, that who makes the profit and who owns that profit is a very interesting concept. The DPDP Act protects your information, but it does not allow or create a regime in which the benefits of this user-generated data are shared, or who owns it is the question. Therefore, the Supreme Court has now given the date of 9th of February, and it has asked the center to find sufficient understanding and to create this idea of sovereign protection of this data. Now, as you can see, it has a lot of information. Let's do one thing. Let's try to make sense of it for a UPSC aspirant. This article is not written for a UPSC aspirant. Let's make sense of it. So, the core issue here is data and data protection. It is basically data protection. Data protection, as it is an important topic within GS paper 3. And if you talk about governance around it, it becomes GS paper 2. Now, data protection, the CCI, the NCLAT, both have reprimanded Meta, WhatsApp. The issue which CCI and NCLT pointed out was with regards to the concept of monopolistic behavior and the idea that consent is coercive, meaning we have no other option but to accept those terms and conditions. So therefore, there's a coercive aspect to it, right? Now, there is a certain 234 crore fine, which basically CCI and NCLT upheld. Now, initially this whole conversation was about data location, was about data usage, and it was about data centralization, meaning a subsidiary is mining the data for a parent company. This was the issue. However, when Meta took this case to the Supreme Court added a new aspect to it, which is data as property and data value of this data. And what it did was it pointed out that the DPDP Act of 2023 does not take into consideration how this value will be redistributed, or distributed. Now see, this issue is as of right now sub judice. It is purely sub judice. So we don't really know what will be the outcome of it. But what we have been able to ascertain and what has been established is this very interesting aspect, that data and its mining generates profits. If those profits are going to an offshore entity, is it not a drain of economic value and economic wealth? We will wait till 9th for what does the Supreme Court say generally. But this is a very interesting stance which the Supreme Court has taken. Now you tell me, do you understand the difference between CCI and NCLAT approach vis-a-vis the Supreme Court, and how it is approaching this issue, and how these are two very fundamental issues which have been raised? We still can't say anything, sub judice issue. First, the Supreme Court has to take a call. Once it does, we will be talking about it. But very interesting, the bodies which should have been talking about something like this did not talk about it. Rather, it is the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice who's saying, we don't want you to mine our data and use it and coerce our rural poor to buy certain things and generate profit out of it. And this is where there's a certain type of question which can be coming in the examination, and that can be worded like this is directly out of the data mining, is to take out data and mine it and keep it in what we call as systematized servers. There's a very interesting line out of this concept. In the eyes of the Indian judiciary, a billion silent customers are no longer willing to be raw material for Meta's bottom line. The era of data theft may be ending. Comment. So this is very interesting. A question which you can only answer if you understand everything in the larger concept. Monopolistic behavior means when there is only one player and he or she or that entity can control everything from demand to supply to price determination, everything, right? So this is an interesting question where the concept of data mining, data value, and data as property come into context. Anybody has any issue in understanding this? Anybody has any issue in understanding this? It's a technical article but deals with a lot of interesting aspects. No, sir, I want everybody's consent that we're all on the same page so that we can move forward and understand the next article. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Okay. Now, the second article deals with three concepts together. Data value means that there's a value to the data which you hold. That there's an economic value to the data which is there. Now, these are three articles which have to be read together. First, an editorial about what are the gains out of the US-India deal. Second is based on the concept of how the agriculture and dairy sector has been kept aside. And third is with regards to the Quad and the defense cooperation which has been talked about. So let's discuss them in a certain way so that we can create again a very interesting summarization and mind map for it. SC is taking into consideration the privacy aspect, obviously, but they are saying privacy is one. The value of that data is the equally important question, because privacy has been breached already with regards to how the monopolistic behavior and the consent concept creates. But the idea is that the value of that data is equally important, and how that is going to be transferred is equally important. So it's both economic aspect, also privacy. So CCI and NCLT both talked about. Now, we all know that there has been a very big U-turn in the way India-US relationship has been evolving in the past 1 year with regards to we buying Russian oil, which in turn related to this idea that we were enabling the Russia-Ukraine war, which in turn led to a 50% tariff on Indian imports into the US. And therefore, there was a certain negativity which was generated within this relationship. Now, be it whatever, and when I say whatever, you know what I'm referring to, because there has been a lot of, you can say, conversation being generated outside the parliament, inside the parliament, with regards to the Epstein files, this, that, a lot of different videos have been circulated. And the timing of these two things in a way is quite interesting, because these two things could have happened months apart, but they're happening together. As soon as there was a certain amount of information which was taken out of Epstein files, and that in turn translated into a very quick U-turn. And somehow we, in principle, now listen to me this, because this is not something which the government of India has clarified. In principle, it is being believed that India has pledged to or has argued to the US that it is ready to remove or to reduce the imports from Russia with regards to oil, which would be substituted with Venezuelan oil. Now, the question is, both qualities of oil is very different. That is something which has been flagged by most of the companies in India which refine crude oil, because it is more acidic, it is much more bottom heavy in that regard. But the idea is we will reduce the Russian oil and we will increase the oil which we take from the US, which is basically Venezuelan oil. Now the question was, this in turn has led to Trump to agree to an 18% tariff, which is much lower than what we were having previously. So the idea is that the article talks about this in a context of the victory of diplomacy, that it is a sustained dialogue, technical negotiation and diplomacy, that India and US have been able to agree to a reduced tariff. Now, it may be that whatever is happening beyond the parliament, beyond the BTA, which is bilateral trade agreement, maybe it has nothing to do with Epstein, it has nothing to do with nothing, and therefore it was purely a diplomatic understanding. But for you as a UPSC aspirant, the controversy and the politicization of this issue is useless, because UPSC aspirants are not asked questions with regards to how a politicization of an issue is happening. You rather have to understand what is the value of the India, India-US BTA, bilateral trade agreement between India and US, what is the value of it? So we really don't need to be going into why and when, specifically when. Rather, we have to understand how does it impact us. The opaque nature of this agreement, and with regards to even Trump arguing that the agricultural sector and the dairy industry has been opened and there will be imports from America with regards to dairy and agriculture, which is something which India has always said no to, and even Piyush Goyal has said that we have not agreed to it because there are no specific details, unlike the FTA with EU, where there was very specific details shared by the government. There's a lot of speculation which is happening. Now, we will not go into the speculative aspect. That is not the job of a UPSC aspirant. Rather, we will do one thing. We'll try to understand the importance of this deal. When we ascertain the importance of this deal, when you take into consideration the importance of the US market for India, 20% of all total exports from India goes to the US. So therefore, it is much bigger than the EU also. And therefore, the sectors which are going to gain out of it is going to be apparel, gems, jewelry, agricultural products, footwear, leather, and other manufacturing goods. What is even more important is that this will allow for better manufacturing, value, supply chain to be get integrated, and employment. But what is interesting is that previously we were at a comparative disadvantage. Now we are at a comparative advantage, because if you look at the tariffs which India is now going to pay, it is going to pay lower tariffs than two set of manufacturers. Meaning, for the apparel sector, Vietnam and Bangladesh are paying more. So India allows, or this BTA allows India to have a comparative advantage over Vietnam and Bangladesh when it comes to price competitiveness. This is going to be a game changer if from made in Bangladesh and made in Vietnam, it could be made in India products which is used in the US. Same way, global competitiveness, India has a better edge or better trade deal as of right now vis-a-vis China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Brazil, South Africa, Pakistan, and ASEAN countries. Therefore, this can translate into more exports into the US, and therefore global supply chain value. We can increase our share. This is an important point, because looking at gems and jewelry, marine products, and food and processing, all tariff sensitive areas, this not an FTA but a bilateral trade agreement allows for most of our sectors to gain both in the short term and the long term. Long term, it will allow for better investment and better economic, you can say, integration with the US. Now, there's a very big question mark here, which I'll come to before. Let's do one thing. Let's try to summarize what we've done till this point. What we are trying to understand is the US India bilateral trade agreement, and what we've been able to ascertain is with 20% of export destination or export towards the USA, it is very, very important that this 18% tariff gives us a global edge. And that global edge happens because in the manufacturing sector, in the sector related to what is called as gems and jewelry, we get vis-a-vis our main competitors a better deal. We get a better deal. Now, the most important aspect here is that all of this is fine. All of this is fine, which is gems and jewelry encourages joint ventures, employment intensive sectors, would generate employment also, the idea that it supports collaboration, the idea that China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Brazil, we have a better understanding. The question is, how long will it hold? Meaning, very simply, understand two things. It's not that we've not had friendly relationships with the US, nothing new. But looking at the overall pattern of India-US relationship and looking at the behavior of Trump, do you think that this is a certainty? Do you think that is a certainty? Simple question to you. Do you think that is a certainty that all of this will go forward in the same form and will never be changed? And the answer to this question is no. Today, Trump wants to figure this out with India, so he's doing it. But for example, tomorrow we do something which he doesn't like. For example, we try for Chabahar port to go forward. We align with Iran, or we align with, for example, Russia again, or we align with China for some form, or we just don't want to accept what the US is saying. All of this will go down the drain. So the point is, yes, it's an important deal, but there are still question marks. The first question mark is, will this stand the test of time? Second question mark has been now answered by Piyush Goyal in the parliament itself. The biggest question mark was, Trump was arguing and Trump has asserted that the US will get access to the agriculture and dairy sector in India. However, according to him, there is no component wherein agriculture and dairy have been taken into consideration. These are two very sensitive areas where our farmers can be impacted by the very, very capital intensive, machine driven, very, you can say, capital driven and very mechanized agriculture and dairy sector of the US. And that is where the idea is that the government is arguing, we have not had any form of agreement and we have been able to protect the Indian agriculture and dairy sector, but no details have been shared. They have rather argued that because US is a very important supplier of nuclear and aviation technology, we have now done this in national interest. Now, to be very honest, the biggest supplier of aviation into India from the US is which company? Priya Yadav, just refresh your stream and move and change your quality from 144 to 720. This is streaming at 720. Everybody has the same concept, right? Okay. What is the manufacturer which supplies aircraft into India? Very good. Very good, Aman Singh. Aman, as he pointed out, is Boeing. Now, Boeing, as of right now, is one of the most problematic companies, and it is in rather US's interest to secure the deal with India because Boeing had recently said that it is going to supply 2 planes a month to the major aviation partners in India. As of right now, we know that there was another fuel switch issue which came up in a Boeing flight itself of the Air India, where it cut off automatically 3 times. So the question is this in the interest of India or in the interest of the US? That Boeing is able to secure a better understanding, and because Airbus, which is based out of the EU, had secured a very lucrative deal vis-a-vis how it was going to supply aircraft parts to India and the aircraft to India under the India-EU FTA, this was going to be a standard reaction. This was going to be a standard reaction because Airbus was able to secure a very good deal. Therefore, Boeing had to do it. And therefore, there are multiple factors which are at play here. So one question mark which still remains, which still needs to be answered and would be answered over the next maybe months, which is it really that there is no provision for agriculture and dairy? Further, the newspaper argues or the Hindu argues vis-a-vis what is called as Quad cooperation in critical minerals. Now, this is a positive element, very interesting element. It has now been close to 6 to 8 months that the word Quad had not been used in most of the circles. In most of the bilateral, multilateral engagements, the word Quad was not used. Because India, Japan, US and Australia, India and US had a very sour relationship for the past 6 to 7 months. Somehow, and quite naturally also, as soon as this deal has gone forward, two very, very interesting, you can say, one old and one new organization have been talked about. One is that Quad cooperation is back, that India will be used by the US or India will use the US to balance China in the Indian Ocean world and in South China Sea. But what is even more interesting is there is an aspect here which is related to the concept of critical minerals. There is now a critical minerals ministerial which has been created in Washington, which is also eyeing the Greenland sector and Venezuelan critical minerals, where they are arguing that we need to secure semiconductor supply because China holds everything. We need an alternative supply route. Now, this is where basically the US is trying to balance China. China holds most of the critical minerals. 86% of all imports into India are actually from the Chinese sector only. So this critical minerals ministerial is quite interesting. So if we take everything into consideration, India-US bilateral trade agreement, there are 5 to 6 positives, 5 to 6 negatives. The positives is that we are now talking about critical minerals. The conversation with regards to quads and an alternative is being talked about. The tariff reduction to 18% gives us global competitiveness, and it will allow us to balance Russia and China. Now, what is the negative here is that don't have finer details. Dairy and agri sector, are they really out? Then Trump erratic behavior, and with regards to all of this, the you can say US led alliance versus BRICS. Now this is very interesting. This is also an aspect which has been talked about, that is this a tactic to distract India from the commitment it has made into BRICS? Because the more the US was pushing India or was creating more and more a tariff regime for India, BRICS was becoming more and more stronger. We all had seen Xi Jinping, Putin and our Prime Minister together in a huddle, ignoring Pakistan vis-a-vis all of that, and the de-dollarization aspect, the idea that we will trade in our own currencies, and furthermore, you can say defense cooperation. So there was an aspect where the BRICS versus US alliance, how it is trying to weaken the BRICS also, because if India becomes more integrated into the US economy, it would obviously have to forego its responsibilities in the BRICS. That is the presumption. So again, this is an evolving concept. I hope that we will have more clarity as we go on, but what I want from you is you should be able to answer this question, which is the India-US BTA indicates a reset of the ties between the two nations. I think this is the reset button being pressed after a certain period of acrimonious relationship or negativity or the reciprocal tariffs which were souring a relationship. This is a positive step in that, right? Okay. Salman, if you have not watched the first 5 minutes of this session, in the first 5 minutes, I've actually told you that today at 11:30, there is going to be a video which is going to announce how Conquer Prelims phase 2 and 3 is going to go ahead. For phase 2, it will happen on the app. All the details will be shared. For phase 3, the concept of one-stop marathons will start. Marathons, I've already asked everybody to tell me what topic they want to take with regards to first session of history in the comment section. So first watch the video properly and then ask. Perfectly fine. So I hope that now that quenches your thirst with regards to Conquer Prelims and Conquer Mains. Right. Now, I have given you the answer. Give me an answer, I've given you the answer. Okay. Everybody's on the same page with me? Yes or no? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Now we have 3 articles to deal with, which are interesting in themselves and quite relevant for GS paper 3, GS paper 2 and generally for prelims. This article of data point of the Hindu newspaper talks about contractual teachers. See, as of right now in the education sector, there's a very strong, you can say, trend towards what is called as informalization. I can have one teacher who teaches for 20 hours, for example, in a week, 20, maximum 25 hours, sometimes 30 hours. He or she gets social security benefit. He or she also gets all the benefits as a permanent employee, and they get PF, they get the concept of LTC and everything. And that I can contrast with a contractual teacher who gets more or less. For example, if this person gets 50,000 rupees, this person gets 40,000 rupees. But this contractual teacher, in most cases, it is half of what they get. But taking this into consideration, I will opt for the contractual person at 40,000 because I don't have to give any benefits. I don't have to give any social security. He or she is not on my roll. He is just a contractor. That's a cost which I can offset at any given point of time. And I can just offset it at any given point of time. It's a new trend, which is I would rather prefer a contractual teacher over a permanent teacher. Now, the argument which the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan would make or the government would make is that there's a shortage of teachers. If there's a shortage of teachers, make these contractual teachers permanent teachers. But that is not the case. Now, what the data point tries to establish is in Pondicherry or Puducherry as we speak, there is a major protest which is happening of contractual teachers against the government that we want to be regularized. We have been exploited. This is unpaid exploitative mechanism which has been created within the education sector. If you are, for example, in any university right now, you must have seen there are 2-3 type of teachers which you must have seen, which is permanent teachers, guest lecturers, ad hoc teachers. So this ad hoc and guest is nothing but the same concept of informalization. I also taught in 2-3 colleges as ad hoc teachers. So ad hoc concept is he is considered as a full lecturer only on paper. The relationship between the college and the lecturer is of a contractual concept. Contract being that you will get the amount but no form of social security. That is a trend which has not been there, which has been there for the past now a decade or so, but data point wants to point this out. Now, the first interesting thing which it points out is according to the UDIS plus data that teachers employed on contractual or part-time basis are 16% of the total teachers in the workforce today, which is close to 16 lakh teachers. Less wages, no social security. Went from 15 lakhs to 15.5 lakhs to 16 lakhs by 2024 from 2022. Last 3 years increased by 1 lakh. Now, if you go further from calling them para teachers to guest lecturers to Shiksha Mitra, if you go further, what is interesting data is this. The data says, and I'll point it out to you here, that 21% of private schools at least have half of the workforce on contract, and close to 8% of state government schools, close to 77,000 schools fall into this category. Meaning this percentage which you see here is any school which has more than or close to 50% workforce as part-time. Central government schools have 4.5% of all central government schools have 50% contractual. Government aided have 5.6. State government is 7.7%. All India 11%, meaning all schools which are there in India, 11% of them have 50% or more, at least half of their workforce contractual. And in private sector, you can see how the exploitation is exponentially higher, double that of the national average, which is quite interesting. Now, is it good, sir, for contractual basis hiring also? It is not good it is only good for the management, not good for the teacher. Now, if we try to understand rural-urban divide, more or less equal, but what is interesting is this data, the state by state data. Most of the teachers who are actually on contractual basis, Mizoram, Arunachal, Jharkhand, Dadra Nagar Haveli, Meghalaya, Sikkim. This is a very interesting concept that most of these schools on higher reliance on contractual and part-time are concentrated in the northeastern sector. And rural-urban, more or less 14 and 15%. So the idea is, what do you do with this information? What do you do with this information? Does Code of Social Security cover the contractual teachers? No. They are like a contractual teacher is like a gig worker, which you see is as a, for example, a Zomato rider and a contractual teacher have the same concept. The only difference is that the nature of work is different and he gets per ride basis, he gets per hour basis. And there is no job security, nothing like that. You can be removed within 1 day notice. 1 day notice. Contractual teachers can be removed on any given day with no social security, no pension, nothing whatsoever. So exactly, he's a gig worker, pure gig. Now, what to do with this information? The following conclusions can be used by you in the examination. The following conclusions can be used by you in the examinations when it comes to issues in the education sector. First is informalization. Informalization. Informalization means they are trying to create more and more, you can say, space for or a regime in which contractual teachers mostly outnumber the what we call as permanent teachers. This adds to a no social security net for majority, at the same point of time exploitative behavior and less pay. We have seen that in the Northeast there's a rising trend, and we have seen that 11% of all schools in India, this you should remember, in India have close to 50% workforce in contractual. In the long list of issues which our education sector faces, this is the whole concept. Sir, here the data exclusively discusses on schools, or this show lies on universities, only on schools. UDIS plus would be only about schools. I am telling you about colleges from my own experience, as it is concept of whole started from here. See, the concept of ad hocism, the concept of ad hoc is something which was actually started in bureaucracy for the first time. In the past 20 years, if you analyze properly, the way state PCS and UPSC interact, which is every officer who is there from a state PCS after a certain point enters into gazetted rank. So what the government of India did was it created a new category. It was called ad hoc SP or ad hoc DSP or ad hoc SSP, meaning they were given that position on a temporary basis because there was shortage of what we call as the personnel per se. For example, there is a DSP who is from state PCS, for example, UP state PCS, and there is a SP position, but the problem is there is no officer for that. So what they used to do was DSP was given ad hoc position of SP. So ad hoc judges is a separate issue altogether, but ad hoc position was started in bureaucracy first. From there was a movement away from ad hoc bureaucracy to the concept of ad hoc teachers. Teachers was the second zone to get affected. Then it went into the universities. Now everywhere you will find contractual labor, and this concept of ad hoc has been now normalized. Now there's nothing called ad hoc. It is either contractual or permanent. This is called informality, or rather formalization by informalization. Very interesting concept, which is that at the end, when everybody is going to become informal, that is going to be formal only. So you formalize everybody by making them informal only. That's called formalization through informalization. Very standard labor concept. The old NCERT, 3 new NCERT books, spectrum enough for UPSC Prelims and Mains. Old NCERT plus spectrum, you have to add Nitin Singhania for prelims. Mains should suffice. New NCERTs, which is exploring society and beyond, I would say you can read it, but the problem is it does not have many important topics. Delhi Sultanate is not there, Mughals is not there, though questions are coming in the examination directly out of these areas. So you can refer to the old NCERT, you can refer to Spectrum and Nitin Singhania. Then you are still good enough. You have to still refer to Bipin Chandra's India Struggle for Independence for Mains Level Understanding for what we call as Modern India. Or you can refer to the courseware which has all 5 together, totally your call. Okay, so I think we all understand this. We all understand this. What is the basic conclusion which we have come to? Ad hoc concept, the concept of what is called as temporary labor which is created within a formalized zone. Right? Okay. Now, moving out of this, this is a very interesting topic which I want to discuss is because it has a colonial past. See, now let's go to you. If you followed my classes, that is fine. Don't have to go to Nitin Singhani. That is for a person who's not gone through the classes. Okay. So the British always had a fear of tribes, right? And there were certain tribes which from the beginning itself started to resist against the British. These tribes mostly, or these communities per se, used to resist British rule via either guerrilla warfare or through dacoit, or what you call as dacoity, which is they will loot the British convoy, or they will, for example, resist it by attacking the British. Now, what the British did was, over the course of 1765 to 1871, they started to note down which are the communities which generally used to resist them and do thuggery, what is called thuggy, dacoity, and these resistance. And what the British did was they clubbed all of them into something called criminal tribes. Criminal tribes. These criminal tribes were considered to be criminal by nature because they were against the British. Now, this criminal tribe concept existed till 1952. When 1952, this Criminal Tribe Act was removed. When Criminal Tribe Act was removed, there were at least thousands of tribes which were called criminal. Most of them got absorbed into what are called as the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. However, some of these communities and castes were not added to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe or OBC list eventually, and they are called as denotified castes. They're called as denotified caste or denotified, what we call as tribes. Now, as there is going to be a caste census this year, what these denotified tribes are asking is either give us a separate schedule or a separate category in the census itself. So the origin of this concept goes back to the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, which was then amended in 1924 and then repealed in August of 1952. The idea that there are certain tribes, registration, surveillance, control of certain criminal tribes and eunuchs, describing criminal tribes as tribes, gangs and classes of persons that were addicted to committing non-bailable offenses. This is the joke of the century, that the looter is saying that they have an addiction to loot. The British were the biggest looters. They were rather addicted to offenses which were non-bailable. And these communities were the first among to confront the British, and that is why they were added into the concept of criminal tribes. Now, when there was an absorption of these what we call as communities, when they were denoticed, Act was repealed in 1952, they were called as denotified tribes. And because 5 years after the 1931 census, the scheduled caste concept was created, within the colonial regime itself, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe was coming into existence. So what the British did was it created two categories, scheduled caste, criminal tribes. But when we got independence, we removed the concept of criminal tribes and rather we introduced the concept of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. But all the tribes in the criminal tribes were not added to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. So they were called as denotified tribes. This is the first thing which you have to understand. 1871, 1924, the Act, and 1952 when it is repealed. And 1931 is the year in which there will be a caste census which will in turn lead to the 1936 Scheduled Caste or Government of India Scheduled Caste Order of 1936. Now the ministry has agreed that in the process of actually the absorbing these denotified tribes, which were close to 1200, close to 267 tribes are still not added into any list. They have not been issued certificates also. So therefore, the question is, how do we deal with them in this census? Now, I'll summarize this for you. I am using courseware finding difficulty reading and remembering ancient medieval. You don't have to remember each and every year. You have to understand the larger ebb and flow. You have to understand the timeline. Looking at the previous year patterns, conceptual questions are more. Basic facts you should learn. That's it. Right? Okay. I'll try to do that, Paras. Now, what is the timeline here? Please try to understand this. Very interesting. From 1764-65, when the Diwani rights was given, till 1871, there were multiple tribes which used to resist the British, and these tribes were in 1871 were added into the concept of criminal tribes. This was amended 1924 again, and criminal tribes were called as tribes which were addicted to looting and non-bailable offences. In between this, in the story 1931 and 1936 and 1952, these are the important years for us. Whilst the concept of criminal tribes existed, the British created through the census of 1931 a new category called scheduled tribes, or rather scheduled castes. These scheduled castes were separate from criminal tribes. Now when 1952 this act is repealed, it had close to 1200 tribes. It had close to 1200 tribes under the concept of what is called as criminal tribes. Most of them got absorbed into the ST or the SC category, but close to 267 remain as what is called today, and this is the word which is quite important, as denotified tribes. Now they are not getting benefits, they are not getting certificates, and in the census which is going to happen in 2026, the caste census which is going to happen in the 26, these denotified tribes are saying we should be added into a separate category itself. This is basically the timeline of this whole article, that how from the period of creation to 1871, 24, 31, 36, 52, how all of this is interacting together. Denotified tribes means tribes which were denotified out of the criminal tribes but was not added into either the scheduled caste or scheduled tribes and are considered to be backward but not given any benefits or certificates. This is basically the concept. So this I am trying to introduce to you this concept so that whilst the ministry is now taking into consideration the fact that we have to add these denotified tribes somewhere, the question is how. The question is how. That is the whole point. So they may be given a status like SC/ST. Most of them were added into SC/ST. But the question is, if they are not added to SC/ST, then what type of protection do they get? There's a certain scheme which was there for them, but there is not a good amount of utilization of any of the money within that scheme. So therefore, people are saying that there is need for further protection and further forms of understanding which need to be created here. So before we move to the last topic, what have we discussed today? We have understood a meta versus the SC standoff with regards to value of data itself. We then have understood US and India bilateral trade agreement and what are the positives and the negatives. Then we have understood the concept of what is called as denotified tribes. What is called as denotified tribes and its colonial origin. Then we talked about contractual labor and contractual teachers with regards to the UDIS plus data, And the last thing which I want to discuss, and because all of you are here, remember at 11:30 there will be a video which will explain to you phase 2 and phase 3 when they are going to start, and within the community post you will get everything, the schedule and everything will be given to you. Now, the last is that because of an hydrogen leak, the NASA moon mission, which was going to be just a fly past around the moon, not the landing on the moon itself, the Artemis, what we call as mission itself, that has now been aborted till March because the wet dress rehearsal which happened, in which liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen is added into the launch vehicle. There was a major leak of hydrogen, which in turn led to delays previously also, has happened again also. So with this, we finish the agenda for today. I will see you tomorrow with another set of issues. I hope that you all will watch the session on Conquer Prelims phase 2 and phase 3. At the same point of time, remember that you also have to fill up the forms. If 27, 28 students, fill up at least the first 3 steps, 26 students, all 4 steps. And if there's any issue, use the link given in the description box to tell us your issue, and we have a specific helpline for that. So thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye.